Hi guys, welcome back. I'm Naha and this is 30 Days of Tarot. Hope you guys are having a good week. Feels like this month is just clipping right along, right? I was actually teaching a class tonight and I had one of my students ask me, Naha, isn't this weekend middle pillar? So once a month at the House of Intuition here in Los Angeles, I lead a group healing ritual. It's a Kabbalistic ritual. I walk everybody through the meditation and we use crystals and light candles and there's an altar and it's just a very, very beautiful ceremony. And you would think that after doing it this many consecutive months for this many years that I would know when it's coming up because we always do it on the third Saturday. And it just caught me off guard. I guess, you know, I've been so focused on doing these tarot videos that I didn't even realize that was coming up. So before we know it, it's going to be 2019, right? Well, I am excited to share with you guys what I've got for you today. This is going to be not only a tarot unboxing, but also a creator interview because I was able to ask some questions to one of the collaborators of this deck, and her name is Jessa Crispin. Now, I was first introduced to this deck, and I didn't even realize it, maybe like 3 years ago when I got this book, The Creative Tarot. And this was actually something that was gifted to me. It's called A Modern Guide to an Inspired Life. And one of the things that's really unique about this book is this author really gives a very modern day approach, a modern day context to the cards. She goes through every single one of the cards, and then she also gives recommended materials for each card. And those materials might be other books, pieces of music, stories. I love to hear what other people's sort of ways and interpretations. And in this book, she's got, for the most part, all of the cards laid out with the traditional Rider-Waite cards. But she's also got these color plates in the middle. And these color plates are from the deck that we're going to be looking at today. And there's not that many of them. There's, let's see, there's the 5s, the 9s. I know that the Knights and Queens are in here. And there's just a couple major cards. And I remember seeing these and thinking, God, these are cool. And what deck is this from? And I guess I wasn't able to find it, or this deck might have not even existed at this time, because I don't know that this deck was actually out at the time that this book was published. So this is the Spolia Tarot. And after I had read this and put it away, and maybe a year or two passed, I'd completely forgotten about these images. And it wasn't until just recently, over this last year, that I ran across them again. And that happened when I was browsing one of my very favorite tarot deck websites, Two Sides Tarot. It's an Australian-based shop, and it's a very curated collection of some of the newest artistic decks that are coming out. I've spoken about them before, and there's the Two Sides Tarot and then the Little Red Tarot, which is UK-based, and they're both very well curated, nice selections of cards, and some of the more rare things you're not going to get from the major retail outlets. So I had seen this Spolia deck on there, and I didn't even still recognize and put it together with the book that this was the same images until I started doing a little bit more research on the deck and realizing, looking at the name, going, wait a second, Jessa Crispin, where do I remember that from? And then realizing that one of the women that was the collaborator of this deck was the writer of this book. So you might actually have this book and not know about this deck, or you might have the deck and not know about the book, but either way, links will be down below. So I'm going to go ahead and start opening up this package. As I said, this came from Australia, and I think that there's a little bit more in here than just the cards. So this is a collaboration between an artist named Jen May, who it has been pointed out in multiple places that is a Scorpio. And I don't know, Scorpios tend to have kind of a affinity for the occult. I'm actually Scorpio rising, and so I sort of think that's where I get kind of like my wizardiness from. Leo, Aquarius, Moon, Scorpio rising, in case anybody's curious. And why don't you guys go ahead and leave your signs down in the comments? We already know where you live. Now we're going to know what sign you are. So let's go ahead and get into this. And so Jen, the artist, she lives in Brooklyn. And Jessa, she is the writer, and she lives in Kansas City. And I wasn't able to find how exactly it is that these two met each other. All that I know is that Jessa had been a tarot reader for many years, and she'd always kind of wanted to do her own deck, but she wasn't an artist. I can definitely relate. And so she had collaborated with some other things with Jen, and I guess eventually she asked her, said, would you like to make a deck with me? And Jen said yes, and they started working on it. I guess they thought it was going to take them about a year to complete and ended up taking them 3 years. I just got a little note here from Marianne. She's the owner of Two Sides Tarot. So sweet that she would just take the time to write a note saying thank you and hoping that these cards deliver me many interesting and insightful readings. And from the Spolia website, it says, Jen's work, colorful, earthy, with a feminine vibe and pulling from many historical sources, seemed perfect for a tarot deck. And Jessa, who had the background in tarot, was very interested in all of the symbolism and the history, and so she had all of the ideas and could kind of direct the deck, as a lot of times these collaborations. Look, now I've got 2 things here, and one is the cloth. Let's go ahead and we'll open that second. So here is the deck and the Spolia Tarot, and the name Spolia means using rubble as a building material, which is also something that goes back to, I think, a magazine that Jessa used to write that was called Spolia Mag. So I guess they used that idea for this deck. And you will notice that this is thicker than a normal deck of cards. And that's because this deck actually has more than your 78 standard tarot cards. Normally, you've got 40 minor arcana, 1s through 10s in 4 suits, 16 court cards, pages, knights, queens, kings in 4 suits, and 22 major arcana, so 78 total. But Jessa shared that she was very inspired by an older Italian deck, and it's called the Minchiate. This is actually a 16th century deck that originated in Florence, and I went to Florence a couple of years ago, and I always think of Florence as sort of being like a Renaissance Alexandria, just for the fact that wisdom and philosophy and the arts had a patronage just like they did in Alexandria, only not from a royal mandate, but from the ruling class family of the Medicis. And so in a place where those things were backed and funded, absolutely magical things can flourish, right? Artistic things for sure. So in this Minchiate deck, there's not only the standard cards, but there's also additional trumps. There's, I believe, astrological cards, elemental cards. It does have this nice seal on here. So as per usual, I'm going to go in through the bottom, sneak in the back door, if you will, as not to break the seal. So I asked Jessa what got her intrigued in the tarot and a few of her favorite decks. And she said, I think both Jen and I were prime targets because we both, as teenagers, wore a lot of black and listened to Nine Inch Nails. Okay, so they were already sort of there for occult things. But she says she didn't start taking tarot really seriously until she got into her mid-20s, and that she really loved working with the Golden Tarot. Now, there's a few different tarots that have come out that have been called the Golden Tarot, and I'm going to make an assumption that the one she's talking about is the one by Cat Black. It's a really beautiful, popular, Renaissance-looking deck, and you guys might be familiar with that one. So here is the book, first edition, Spolia, written by Jessa Crispin, artwork by Jen May, and designed by Tara Romeo, who I believe did the box. So I am going to take the time to read through this, but I'm interested to see if the card meanings are going to be the same as the ones that she put in her book, Creative Tarot. I know that there are those additional cards, so I do want to see what they have to say about those. But let's go ahead and get into this deck. I've been so excited for this one, you guys. It's one that I've been the most excited to open, and I keep seeing the images online now, so even, I think Tarot Map, was it you that I saw had a video of it? You know, there's other people that are getting this deck and making flip throughs, and I'm just like trying not to look at them because I'm going, oh my god, yes, yes, I know that deck is coming. It is a collage deck, and it's really is its own thing, but it did give me like the slightest reminder of an old collage deck that's one of my favorites, and that's the Tantric Dakini Oracle by Penny Slinger. Do you guys remember that one? The Secret Dakini Oracle. It's been republished over the years. It's still available, but that deck originally came out at the end of the 70s, and before collage decks were made really on the computer, when they were probably a lot more, you know, cutting and glue sticking. So let's go ahead and start taking a look at these. This is the Fool. All right, you guys, are you already sold? You know, a lot of you have been saying, no, I'm spending so much money because you're doing this series and all of these cards. Hey, there's Hermes Trismegistus. This image, you might recognize this. We saw this actually in the Alchemist woodcut. And but you see him with the overlaying of the elements on there. So that golden tarot that Jessa said that she really loved was also kind of a bit of a collage deck. The High Priestess with a serpent here. There was something I found actually in another interview that she had done where she said that she really loves the whole serpent mythology and the serpent woman. And it's funny because a few years ago I was getting very deep in my research of that as well. God, I love these so much. Taking a look at the expression of serpent gods and goddesses across cultures, the Nagas, the Melusine, the sea serpents, the classical Minoan woman holding the two snakes in either hand, even Medusa for that matter. Snakes are just such an interesting, powerful symbol. And so she had said, we snuck in little secrets to this deck, like references to shared love of Hedwig and the Angry Inch. And because one focus of my study has been the lost snake goddesses and studying the link between snakes, sacred femininity, and oracles, my primary contribution to the deck was to say at every draft of a card, maybe we should add a snake. I love that. God, these are beautiful. And actually, when I look at this, I don't know that this was really done on a computer because this looks like it was cut out by hand and assembled that way. I don't know that you can tell from the video, but that's how it appears. So it still has this organic hand-created collage look as opposed to a graphically created collage look. And she did talk about nights spent at Kinko's kind of laying and overlaying things. So I think that that's the way that this was done. I just love the vibrant backgrounds. They're really, really beautiful. And Jessa talks about her learning process as being a mix of the old and new. Old materials, especially ones that predated the Rider-Waite and kind of exploring what decks looked like before they were standardized by the Rider-Waite, and then also incorporating very contemporary writing and those taking a more Jungian approach to the whole thing. And I asked her, was there any specific thing that she is her go-to for when she needs inspiration? And she said art museums, absolutely. That she travels a lot, moves a lot, so there's always something new around to see. And then because her and Jen don't live in the same place, that they're always sort of sending things back and forth to each other across email, things that they're discovering, music, film, and books that they love. It really helps to have a collaborator, and it helps to have somebody to bounce your ideas off of. And that's another thing that she talked about, that she would put her ideas out there and of course want to have every single symbol in there. She speaks about on their website about using images from history, from alchemy to mysticism, mythology, and the natural world, and being meticulous about the colors, the flowers, the crystals, the stones, the animals, and the other imagery that was associated with the specific cards. But then that Jen was able to take that and sort of extract it and boil it down, gorgeous, and make it more elegant. Here's another snake. Of course, snakes being a very important symbol of transformation for the fact that they do shed that skin, and that can be a metaphor for our own rebirth. There's the world. And now let's start looking at the Suit of Swords. There's something about these that I feel like you don't see a lot of black in the tarot, and it just really makes for a powerful message with this single sword right here, doesn't it? So I asked, how does the process start for you? Is it an idea or a discussion or a vision? And she says it depends what she's working on, that with her collaborations with Jen, they always start with a conversation or an email and sort of a, hey, here's an idea, let's talk, and start to see how things might work. And collaboration is interesting for a writer, she said, because writing is usually so solitary. We can become convinced of our individual genius, that all of our ideas are born out of our own singular selves. But collaboration is nice because it gets us out of our damn heads for a moment. And certainly my conversations with Jen have shifted how I interpret certain cards, they've changed how I write, and so on. And this is the back. Now I can't be certain, but the back of these cards look like the little strips of paper that would be left after using an X-Acto knife and cutting out a bunch of images for collage. Do you guys see what I mean? And for the fact that this is called Spolia and that Spolia means using rubble as building material, I can't say that I'm wrong about what that is, but I could definitely be wrong. There's the Ten of Swords, And then here, let's look at the court cards. Oh, you know I love the Queen of Swords, right? Especially as a teacher and a communicator. Look at her. There is the Swords family. One of my favorite questions to ask creators is, what cards did they create first? And everybody answers this question different. So of the interviews that I've done, I've heard the Fool, of course, I've heard the Magician, Ace of Swords on the last one. And she gave me an unexpected answer and said, we did all of the Knights first. She said, I can't remember why we chose to begin with them, other than they maybe seemed like a good energy for the beginning of a project. It was also the moment when we realized, oh yeah, we can definitely work together. Her designs were different from what I described, but in a way that enhanced and deepened my ideas about what the cards were. I think we were both having a little trepidation about whether this could possibly work, such a large project, when we had only collaborated on small things in the past. But getting the Knights done and seeing what we managed to come up with together was reassuring and thrilling. I think there is something appropriate in that, like she says, about maybe that being good energy for the start of a project, because what Knights do is they move things forward. Knights are the people who they've taken one step beyond being a page, and they start having a little bit of courage and a little bit of sense of, I have to be pushing something forward and out into the world. I like to think of the pages as the kid who gets a new instrument for Christmas, like a Casio keyboard, and just kind of bangs away on it. And nobody's expecting them to be perfect. Nobody's expecting them to be Mozart. But then the knight is like the teenager who gets all his friends together and says, you know what? Let's bring all of our instruments over and actually start a band. And it's just that courage to go ahead and start something, to begin something. And, you know, there is the kind of sense that sometimes knights, like teenagers, think they know everything. They haven't matured yet, moved on to become the queen and the king. The queens are really, really gorgeous, are they not? Now that's a Queen of Cups I can really spend some time with. Here's the king. Now let's take a look at the wands. That's the Ace of Wands. Just a beautiful image. This feels very Jungian to me as well, right? So, which cards were the most difficult? She said there were a few. You know, we kept delaying the ones that we felt intimidated by, which meant that when we got to the end, we realized that the cards that we had left were the Devil, the Tower, and the World. And we kept putting them off, and now there was no escape. They all had to be dealt with in a row. You know, I can relate because some of the decks that I plan on opening for this series are ones where I really want to do a lot of research and spend a little bit more time exploring the background for you guys. And some of those I'm putting off, and there's a few larger hauls that are also coming up. And it's getting down to the point where all of those are going to have to basically peel out in a row. So I'm just going to have to power through the rest of this month. But I am just really, really excited to be able to look at these with you because they are just so beautiful. And we are just about to get to the end of the suit of wands, the suit of fire. Fire and movement and direction and will and everything that holding a wand implies. Something that you can point and go, let's go this way. Everybody follow me. There's a very much like a follow the leader kind of energy in the wands. And then this final suit, the suit of pentacles, corresponding to the element of earth. These aces are just stunning. And there is some traditional imagery, don't you see, in the 2 and 3 with the classical rider deck. And then others where there's a large departure. But even here, I like the fact that some of the cards where we typically see a male figure, they've changed it to be a female figure, and probably vice versa, because we saw a female figure on the Fool, and here we see on the 4 of Pentacles, where she still has a somewhat unhappy look on her face, but we see a woman there, not a man. I think that some of these images are what kind of remind me a little bit of that old Secret Dakini Oracle. I'm just going to show you guys some of these. They're just beautiful. And even though they vary a lot from card to card, they're still cohesive. I feel like there's a lot of diversity, but it's also, it works. You know, it's not quite so all over the place. Where I have seen some decks, some collaborative decks and some collage decks where it just seems like it's a little bit too all over the place. Now, the remainder of this deck is the additional cards, and it looks like, first of all, we have the astrological cards. So these, I don't know that I would necessarily shuffle them in and use the deck in total, or if I would use these separately. I think that these can become an interesting oracle in and of themselves. So we can take a look at each of these zodiacal cards. Now, I already think of certain major cards as corresponding to the zodiac, so these would add just an extra element. There's Virgo and Scorpio, the sign that we are just about to be in. And there is Sag. Oh, that's a cool, weird Capricorn with a skeleton of the goat with the fish tail, the sea goat that is the symbol of Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, and air, water, fire, and earth. This one reminds me of when I was at the Kilauea Crater just a few years ago. If you guys haven't gotten a chance, watch my short film on here on the Naha stone. If you like my tarot videos, then that might be something that's a little bit different, but sort of refreshing. And it's the story of a little spiritual pilgrimage that I went on. So that is the deck. And now we're going to look at this little cloth that I also ordered from Two Sides. And this is actually the Spolia cloth. So it was also created by the same artist. And you can see that there. I just thought that that was really, really cool. You can see it does say Spolia here in the letters. There is the snake. Couldn't live without that, right? And then we see the elements up in the corner. So I just thought that that was a very cool thing and something that I'll be keeping those cards wrapped up in and using for when I'm doing readings. And I have a feeling that this could be a deck that I will try taking in and using with my clients, my one-on-ones. Some decks I feel like will just be instantly ones that I can jump in and start working with, and I feel like this could be one of those. It's not such a departure that I'm going to be sitting there going, what card is this? But also it just feels like it's new and fresh and different. So it will give me some new ideas, some new vocabulary for my readings as well. And usually when I start with a new deck, I just go ahead and jump right in and use the traditional meanings as I already know them, and then start to see how those morph and change as I introduce the new imagery to my understanding of the card that I already have. So the language that I have for every card just continues to grow and evolve, and every time I do introduce a new deck, I see new things and new possibilities in those cards. But I have to say, I am just really, really impressed by this deck, and I'm so happy to have my hands on one. A couple final questions I had for Jessa. Is there any particular magical occurrence that happened during the making of this deck? She said, I can't think of anything more magical than actually finishing a project like this. It could have fallen apart at so many points. And when I asked her what the biggest lesson was that she learned while making this deck, she actually said that she learned that crowdsourcing is a nightmare. So this deck, I believe it must have been on Kickstarter. I didn't buy it on Kickstarter, but I have a feeling if she did crowdsourcing that it must have been on that, or maybe Indiegogo, one of those kind of sites. She said, people warned us, but taking responsibility for every aspect of bringing something into the world is complicated and hard and exhausting. But pairing with a publisher wouldn't have necessarily been any better. It would have been exhausting in wholly other ways, I'm sure. So I also asked her if there's anything else in the pipeline, anything that she has coming up, and she simply said for us to stay tuned that they are working on their next collaboration. So thanks again, you guys, so much. Should we pull a card for today? I feel like we should. This is such a big deck. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to shuffle it, but I think I can kind of do it sideways like this. Ah, yes. Okay, I'm going to give these cards a couple shuffles, and then we'll pull a card for today. And while I'm shuffling, I'd like you guys to be thinking about something in your life that you could use some guidance. Maybe you do have a question that you want to think about. Maybe there's just an area of your life where you feel like you have a little bit of a blind spot right now. And so we're just going to ask for an honest look at this situation. If there's anything that we need to be aware of, anything that can be helpful in us having more clarity about it. I'm going to shuffle one more time. And I'm going to cut once with, we'll do a deep cut, as they say. And here's our card. 8 of Wands. Oh, I love this card. All right. So in the 8 of Wands, we see wands flying through the sky. This is the card of swiftness. And it is a card of saying yes. 8s are the number that correspond to Mercury and to connection and intellect and conversation. And wands are the suit of movement and direction. So put those two things together. And this is all about talking, moving, meeting, collaborating. So very much something that we can learn from the creators of this deck, right? Whenever I see the 8 of Wands, this is telling me don't be afraid to reach out and don't be afraid to say yes to invitations. Not to put a ton of expectations on it, not to say, oh, I've got to like have this meeting or make this thing happen, or if I go out with somebody, I need to expect to get something out of it. No, just go ahead to link up with somebody, see what happens, see what comes out of it. And just like Jen said, get out of our own damn heads for a moment. So I hope that you guys enjoyed, and make sure and subscribe if you're not already, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.